Hi, today we are going to review how to write function rules or equations of tables. So when it says function rule, you're just going to write the equation. So these first four questions are all review. What variable do we use to represent rate of change or slope? We use m. What variable for initial value or y-intercept? We use b. And then usually we write y equals mx plus b to write the rule or the equation. And you call that form slope-intercept form. In another video, we learned that if the slope is undefined or it's a vertical slope, it won't have a y-intercept and it doesn't have a slope that is a number. So we can't write it in y equals mx plus b. So we write it as x equals a number, and it will usually be the number that it is in the graph. And then the way that you find rate of change from a table, we're going to review that. We're going to go over some examples, but you find the difference in y values, and put it over the difference in x values. And the way you find the initial value or the y-intercept from a table, remember, I feel like students have a really easy time finding it from a graph. They just look at their graph and they say, where does it cross the y-axis? Well, if you remember, that point is always going to have 0 and then whatever number it is. So you're looking for where x is 0, you're trying to find out what y is. So find what y is. When x equals 0. Okay, we're going to do a few examples, and this looks really hard because there's a lot of boxes, but it's actually really nice and easy. The first couple boxes help you fill in the third. So we're going to do this first one. I'm going to find my slope first because that's my first box, and I want to find change in y over change in x. So you could do this in the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All you have to do is make sure that you choose your x and your y. They're already there, so you can just choose this is going to be my first point and this is going to be my second point, and then you can plug them into your formula. So the way we would do this one is we do 7 minus 9 and then over 0 minus -1, and then we just figure it out. Now, I think that way is a little cumbersome for me, so I like to just think, how did it change from one to the next one? So from 9 to 7, how did it change? It went down, and it went down 2. And then from -1 to 0, it went up, and it went up 1. Then I'm going to put my change in y, so this number over this number. -2 over 1, and when I divide that, I get -2. So that's my answer for slope. Pretty simple. Let's go ahead and find our y-intercept. What I love about this table is that if you forgot how to find the y-intercept, it tells you. You're looking for the point 0 something. So we're going to look for our point 0 something, and it is right there. And that something is 7. So that's going to be what I write for my b in my equation. Now we're going to write in our equation. We found our equation is y equals mx plus b. Oh, sorry, that got a little scary looking. Mx plus b. So I'm going to write what I found for m in for m, and then what I found for b in for b. So that's how you do that one. Now, it can get a little tricky when you don't have b, or when, like this one, your table looks kind of weird. So we're going to go ahead and try to find our slope on this one. I'm going to do my change in y over change in x. So change in y is +1, and then my change in x, it doesn't move at all, so it's just going to be 0. So we're going to put 1 over 0. Now, a lot of my students like to put 0 or they like to put 1 for this answer. I would recommend that you go over to your calculator and just test it and see what happens. 1 divided by 0 is undefined. This is an undefined slope, and if you were to think about it, when you have x always being the same value, this is going to be a straight line up and down like that. So it's undefined slope. Then this gets even trickier when we try to find where x equals 0, because if x never changes. So there's never going to be a y-intercept, and if you were to look at our little graph depiction, it doesn't ever cross the y-axis. So I'm going to write DNE, which means does not exist. So it doesn't make any sense to write y equals undefined x plus DNE. Like, that's not an equation we can do any math with. So instead, we're going to write this as an x equals equation, and I bet you can guess what x it equals. X equals -1, as in x is always -1. So it's really easy to write this equation, because if it's the same number on one side, you can just write whatever that variable is equals that number that it always equals. So I bet you can guess what this one is going to be. Y is always 8. So this equation, once you get through writing the slope and the y-intercept, it is y is always 8. Y equals 8. Now let's go ahead and do a tough one where we have to find the y-intercept. We're going to do this one. First things first, you should find the slope first. I feel like it gives you a feel for what the table is like. So we're going to write our slope in our first box here. And you can choose any points you want to do your change in y over change in x. I'm going to choose ones that are not negative at all, because that way I know that I can actually do the math for that and I won't screw it up. So I chose those two. Please always make sure that you're using the same rows for your x and y. That way you don't make a mistake. So change in y is going down 1, and then 2 to 4 is going up 2. So I'm going to put my y over x, -1 over 2, and that equals negative. A negative divided by a positive is a -1/2. So there's my slope. That was actually the easy part. Now I want to find what y is when x equals 0. Unfortunately, it is not in this table. So we need to kind of add it in. 0 would be in between the positives and the negatives. And remember, we want where x is 0, so I'm going to put a little 0 right there. If you want, you could also draw it off to the side, like this. 0 something. I like to just add it in the table because it helps me visualize. So put a 0 in there. On the left, this x is going up by 2's. So 0 is right in between -2 and +2. So I want whatever is right in between 4 and 2. So I think it would make sense if this is going -2, 0, 2, 4. Then 4 blank 2 1. I think it makes sense that a 3 would go in there. So we're going to put a 3 for our b. Now, if it's hard for you to find the pattern, you can always use your slope fraction to help you. You know that it's -1/2. So if x is -1/2, that means that if x, because this is change in x, is going up 2, which it does, this is +2, that means our y should go the opposite direction. It should go down. And then 1 is the top of my thing. Do you see how I did that? I have -1 over 2, and that equals -1/2. So that's another way you can do it. Now, if it were going a different amount, if it were going 4 up, then you would need to change it so that your fraction is equivalent. If it were going up 4, you would need to go down, well, how many fourths get me 1/2? 2. So be careful on that one. Usually it's only going to be 1, but that's how you do it. I find it easier to think of like, how do I continue this pattern, and to even add in some boxes. Now, as usual, you could always plug in some points into y equals mx plus b and solve for those, and you'd be able to find your b that way as well. I'm going to go ahead and put the point and slope into this equation. Y equals -1/2 x plus 3. All right, so that is how you do that one, and good luck.